Gennady Golovkin was boxing's most feared knockout artist, a champion who crushed opponents with terrifying ease. But beneath the aura of destruction lurked a controversy that followed him from Kazakhstan to Madison Square Garden. The judges. Was Gennady robbed of his true greatness, or did his style fool the world into believing he was unbeatable? To know the truth, we have to go back to the roots. Gennady Golovkin's story begins far from the bright lights of Las Vegas or Madison Square Garden. Born in 1982 in Karaganda, Kazakhstan, a gritty industrial city in the post-Soviet world, his childhood was forged in hardship. His father worked in the mines. His mother was a lab technician. Life was about survival, not luxury. But it was tragedy that truly shaped the boy who would become a champion. When Gennady was young, both of his older brothers, Sergei and Vadim, were drafted into the Soviet army. They never returned, killed during their service. For a boy who idolized his siblings, the loss was devastating. Yet from that grief came a new fire. Gennady was determined to honor them by becoming strong, by becoming something greater. At 6 years old, he was introduced to boxing. Unlike many who fight for money or fame, Golovkin fought with a deeper purpose. Coaches saw a rare mix of discipline and power in the small boy. His fists carried weight far beyond his size. His footwork was instinctive, his jab sharp even in childhood. By the time he was a teenager, it was clear. Golovkin wasn't ordinary. He was cold, precise, and carried himself with a maturity beyond his years. But even then, whispers followed him about favoritism in the amateur ranks, about decisions in his favor that some thought questionable. It was an early shadow over a young career, and that shadow of politics and judging would follow him all the way into the pros. If there was ever proof of Golovkin's destiny, it came in the amateur ranks. He compiled an astounding record, over 350 fights, winning nearly all of them. His style was already recognizable: relentless pressure, a jab that snapped heads back, and a calmness that unnerved opponents. In the 2004 Athens Olympics, he marched to the middleweight final, winning silver for Kazakhstan. But beneath the medals, controversy simmered. Some critics argued that the amateur system favored him, that decisions often went his way. Others insisted he was simply too good, too sharp, too commanding. Whatever the truth, Golovkin learned an early lesson. Sometimes, greatness alone isn't enough. Politics always had a seat at the table. Despite his Olympic success, Golovkin's transition to the pros was delayed. He turned professional in Germany in 2006 under the Universum promotional banner. But instead of being pushed to stardom, he was sidelined. Promoters didn't see him as a marketable star. His quiet personality and Kazakh roots made him hard to sell in the West. For years, he fought in obscurity, dismantling opponents with ease while the bigger names avoided his path. It was a frustrating time. Golovkin was ready, but the world wasn't. And behind closed doors, whispers grew. Was boxing deliberately keeping him in the shadows? Was it business or fear? The answer would come only after Golovkin broke free and began a streak that turned him into the most feared man in boxing. When Golovkin finally made the leap to the United States in 2012, the boxing world had no idea what was coming. That year, he debuted on HBO against Grzegorz Proksa and demolished him in 5 rounds. Suddenly, the quiet Kazakh was the talk of the sport. Broadcasters hailed his power. Fans were captivated by his ruthless efficiency. And opponents? They started avoiding him like the plague. From there, Gennady went on a rampage. He knocked out Gabriel Rosado, Curtis Stevens, Daniel Geel, one after the other, victims of his thunderous jab and crushing hooks. He didn't just win, he destroyed. His knockout streak stretched to 23 consecutive fights, an almost unheard-of run at the highest level. Crowds at Madison Square Garden roared for him. He became an international sensation, selling arenas in New York, Los Angeles, even Monte Carlo. He called it his big drama show, and fans loved every second. But even in this golden period, questions lingered. Critics claimed his opponents weren't elite. The champions were avoiding him for a reason. Was he truly the best middleweight in the world, or just a hype machine crushing overmatched fighters? The truth would come soon enough, because eventually, Golovkin couldn't be ignored any longer. And when the biggest name in boxing, Canelo Alvarez, finally stepped into the ring with him, Gennady's legacy and the controversy that would define it was about to be written. And when it was, the world would argue about it forever. By the mid-2000s, Gennady Golovkin had become more than just a feared fighter. He was the boogeyman of the middleweight division. Champions, contenders, and rising stars alike wanted no part of him. Rumors swirled of promoters steering their fighters away, of sanctioning bodies finding convenient reasons to delay mandatory bouts. The result was a reign of terror built not only on his fists, but on the fear he inspired. Golovkin collected collected belts with ruthless efficiency. He demolished David Lemieux in Madison Square Garden, showcasing not just power, but patience and technical skill. His jab, once considered just a setup punch, became a weapon in itself, controlling range and punishing opponents before the knockout inevitably came. Against Martin Murray, Willie Monroe Jr., and Dominic Wade, the story was always the same. GGG walked them down, broke them, and left them on the canvas. But even as his dominance grew, so did criticism. Detractors argued that he wasn't facing the very best, that the real elites were avoiding him, or that his team was handpicking fights. Supporters countered that he was avoided because he was too good, too dangerous, too high risk for too little reward. The truth probably lay somewhere in the middle. Golovkin desperately wanted big fights. He called out Cotto, Martinez, even Mayweather. None of them materialized. Fans chanted for Canelo, but the fight seemed years away. Still, the middleweight throne was his. He unified titles, defended them relentlessly, and looked unbeatable. Yet for all the knockouts, for all the belts, there was a nagging sense that GGG's greatness hadn't truly been tested. And boxing, with its long memory and love for drama, doesn't immortalize perfection alone. It immortalizes controversy. And when the call finally came for Canelo Alvarez, boxing's golden boy, that controversy would explode. September 2017, T-Mobile Arena, Las Vegas. The fight boxing fans had begged for was finally here. Gennadiy Golovkin versus Canelo Alvarez. It was billed as a clash of eras, the silent destroyer from Kazakhstan against Mexico's global superstar. The build-up was intense. Canelo had faced criticism for avoiding GGG for years, letting him age while he honed his own craft. Golovkin, undefeated and riding a wave of knockouts, entered as the favorite. This was supposed to be his crowning moment, the night he proved beyond doubt that he was the greatest middleweight alive. And for 12 rounds, many believe he did exactly that. Golovkin pressed forward, jabbed relentlessly, and landed the cleaner, harder shots. Canelo showed brilliance in spurts, countering with uppercuts and slick movement, but the consensus in the arena and among analysts was clear. GGG had done enough. Then came the scorecards. One judge had it for Golovkin, another called it a draw, but the third, Adelaide Bird, shocked the world by scoring it 118 to 110 for Canelo, a card so wide it defied belief. The fight was officially declared a draw, and the crowd erupted in boos. Overnight, a new controversy was born. Fans screamed robbery. Pundits accused the judges of protecting boxing's cash cow. Golovkin, calm as always, simply said he had won the fight, but his reputation shifted. He was no longer just the knockout king. He was the man robbed of his greatest victory. The rivalry with Canelo had begun, but so too had the controversy that would haunt him for the rest of his career. And in the rematch, that wound would only deepen. 1 year later, in September 2018, Golovkin and Canelo met again. This time, the stakes were even higher. Golovkin's undefeated record was on the line, and so was his reputation. He entered the ring determined to erase the controversy of the first fight. The rematch was brutal. Canelo, criticized for running in the first fight, came forward this time, meeting GGG head-on. Golovkin, older but still fierce, relied on his jab and counterpunching, landing crisp shots throughout. Round after round, it was a war of attrition. Canelo's combinations versus Golovkin's pressure and accuracy. By the championship rounds, the fight was razor-close. GGG rallied late, jabbing and snapping Canelo's head back, while Canelo dug deep to the body. The crowd roared with every exchange, sensing history in the making. When the final bell rang, many felt Golovkin had edged it again, narrowly but clearly. The judges disagreed. Canelo was awarded the majority decision. The Golden Boy had his victory. And GGG once again walked away with nothing but the respect of fans who believed he'd been wronged twice. The controversy deepened. Was Golovkin truly robbed again, sacrificed at the altar of boxing politic? Or had age, style, and Canelo's adjustments finally caught up to him? Whatever the truth, the rematch didn't settle the rivalry. It amplified it. And for Golovkin, the sting wasn't just losing his belts, it was losing control of his legacy. Because now, his story wasn't just about knockouts, it was about what the judges had taken from him. When the dust of the Canelo rematch settled, Gennady Golovkin faced an unfamiliar reality. For the first time in his career, he wasn't undefeated. For the first time, he didn't have belts strapped over his shoulders. shoulders. The man who had once been the sport's most feared knockout artist was suddenly forced to rebuild. But rebuilding in boxing is cruel. Golovkin was already in his mid-30s, an age where reflexes dull and recovery slows. Yet, he refused to fade quietly. He returned in 2019, beating Sergey Derevianchenko in a fight many considered too close for comfort. Gone was the wrecking machine who steamrolled opponents. In his place stood a battle-hardened veteran, still skilled, still dangerous, but no longer untouchable. Even so, Golovkin kept winning. He defended the IBF title, picked up another belt, and continued his reign at the top of the middleweight division. But the air of invincibility had cracked. Every fight sparked debates about whether age had finally caught up, whether the wars with Canelo had taken too much out of him, and the whispers never stopped. Fans argued about the Canelo trilogy that still hadn't been completed. Promoters teased it endlessly, dangling hope before the public like bait. Golovkin wanted it. Canelo didn't seem in a rush. Years slipped by, and the once feared Kazakh found himself trapped between what he had accomplished and what he still hadn't proved. By the time the third fight finally came in 2022, Gennady was 40 years old. The man across from him wasn't the same young Mexican star he had first faced, but an even sharper, more experienced version of Canelo. Golovkin fought bravely, but it was clear from the opening rounds. This was not the same G. His jab was slower, his pressure less relentless, his body vulnerable. Canelo dominated, winning comfortably on the scorecards. For many, the trilogy's ending felt hollow. The fights that should have defined an era had instead become symbols of missed timing, politics, and controversy. Golovkin had walked away without a single official win over Canelo. To his supporters, that was the greatest robbery of all. To his critics, it was proof that Gennady, for all his power, had never truly conquered boxing's biggest star. And so the decline of Golovkin wasn't just physical, it was narrative. His story had been twisted, reframed, and overshadowed by those 2 nights in Las Vegas, where judges wrote history in ink many still call corrupt. But the real controversy was still simmering, waiting to be unraveled. The controversy at the heart of Gennady Golovkin's career was not about knockouts, belts, or even his decline. It was about perception, and how 3 judges on 2 nights in Las Vegas may have permanently altered boxing history. To many, Gennady beat Canelo in 2017. The punch stats told the story. More jabs, more power shots landed, more control of the fight. The crowd thought he won. Commentators thought he won. Fighters watching ringside thought he won. Yet, the fight was scored a draw, and the now infamous 118-110 card in favor of Canelo sparked outrage that still echoes today. In the rematch, Golovkin again outlanded Canelo with his jab. He rallied in the championship rounds, showing the grit of a true champion. Yet again, the decision went the other way. Canelo had the belts, the glory, the official win. Golovkin had only the consolation of moral victory. So what happened? Some say it was corruption, boxing protecting its golden goose. Canelo was the sport's biggest star, the pay-per-view king, the fighter who generated millions for promoters, networks, and sponsors. Could the business of boxing really afford to let him lose twice? Others argue the opposite, that Golovkin's style, built on pressure and volume, wasn't always as effective as it looked, that Canelo's defense, slick counters, and bodywork deserved more credit than fans gave him. And here lies the tragedy of the controversy. There may never be a clear answer. For Golovkin's supporters, those 2 fights were daylight robberies, proof that boxing politics had stolen his rightful place as middleweight king. For his critics, they were proof that Gennady, for all his power, could not quite conquer the very best. But either way, those nights didn't just define the rivalry. They defined Golovkin's entire legacy. Because, when history is written, the story of Gennady will always come with an asterisk, not because of what he did, but because of what the judges said. So who was Gennady Golovkin really? A monster who flattened everything in his path? A victim of politics and crooked scorecards? Or simply a great fighter who met an even greater rival at the wrong time? The answer depends on who you ask. On paper, his record is astonishing. 42 wins, only 2 losses, and 37 knockouts. He unified the middleweight titles, sold out arenas, and built a fan base that adored his simple mantra, big drama show. In the ring, he was everything a fighter should be. Disciplined, powerful, relentless, respectful. He never trash-talked. He never disrespected respected opponents, he let his fists do the talking, and for a decade, the language they spoke was destruction. But history doesn't remember numbers alone. It remembers moments. And for GGG, the defining moments of his career will forever be tied to Canelo. 2 fights that millions believe he won. 2 scorecards that said otherwise. 1 trilogy that ended too late, with an aging warrior outgunned by time itself. In the end, Golovkin's legacy is a paradox. He will be remembered as one of the most feared middleweights of all time, a man whose jab was a weapon of war and whose chin was unbreakable. But he will also be remembered as the fighter who, in the eyes of many, was robbed of greatness by the politics of boxing. And maybe that's what makes his story so haunting, because unlike so many fighters who are undone by their own flaws, Golovkin was undone by something outside his control. He did everything right, trained, fought, and won, and still walked away with questions that will never have answers. As the years pass, highlight reels will showcase his knockouts, his dominance, his reign of fear, but whispers of the controversy will always follow. Was GGG the true king of his era, denied his crown? Or was he simply another great fighter, forever chasing a ghost named Canelo? The truth may never be settled, but one thing is certain. In boxing history, Gennady Golovkin's name will never be forgotten.